Mike, Marcus, murder, Miami. What do these four things have in common? Ah, bad boys for life. Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. So, I figured it was about time I did a movie review. I figured it was time just to go for it and stop dragging my feet. So, yes, today's review is for Bad Boys for Life, directed by Adil El-Arbi and Bilal Fallah. They are actually taking over as directors for Michael Bay, who previously directed the first two installments of the franchise. They've directed the first two episodes for the series Snowfall, and they've made other films in the past, including Black and Patser, and they may or may not be doing a sequel to Beverly Hills Cop. Of course, it wouldn't be Bad Boys without Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, who have been the stars of this franchise since 1995, all the way to 2020. So I'll be honest, when this was first announced and when I saw the first trailers and everything, there was a part of me that was excited, but there was a part of me that was just like, it's been a really long time. Bad Boys 2 was 8 years after the first Bad Boys. Bad Boys for Life is 17 years after Bad Boys 2. I get real scared when it comes to that amount of time because, you know, society changes, culture changes, film changes, like so many things change that sometimes you worry about how different it's going to feel as time goes on. Sometimes that can be a good thing, but it's also going to be a bad thing depending on the film. I think it's great as far as visuals and cinematography. I think a lot of those things can change for the better as time goes on, but then some other things you lose in translation. Certain writers, certain styles, certain types of writing, certain grit, and you know, the certain way of filmmaking that you lose as time goes on. So I was worried that this wouldn't feel like Bad Boys. I was worried that it was going to feel like a franchise that was trying to come back from the dead, so to speak. Not that Bad Boys was ever dead, but after 17 years, you know, it's like we haven't thought about this in a really long time. So I was scared that them doing this was just going to be like, oh, okay, we want to make some money, so let's do a third Bad Boys. And the other thing is, when it comes to sequels are already dicey because they always say that lightning never strikes twice. And it's very difficult for a successful film to have a great sequel. We've seen really great sequels and we've seen not so great sequels. And then when it comes to threequels, the number 3 is not good when it comes to sequels. I don't know what happens, but it just seems like when you hit number 3, something just goes awry. Like, it's just like the writers or the actors or the story or something just goes haywire. And it's just like, yeah, we don't know how to make this work anymore. And we have seen it throughout various genres. We've seen it in superhero films like Spider-Man and X-Men. I am still irritated about X-Men: The Last Stand. You've seen it in science fiction films like The Matrix and Terminator. We've even seen it in animated films like Shrek the Third. I still have not seen Shrek the Third, but from what everyone has told me, I should not waste my time. I still might need to watch it down the road to see if everyone was right or if I would feel differently. But yeah, it just seems like when it comes down to the number 3, it is never a good thing. So just the combination of all those two things, I was just like, I don't know if this is gonna be good. I wanna love this, I wanna be excited for it, but I'm just worried it's gonna feel unnecessary and just like whack. So the thing that has always made the Bad Boys franchise is, of course, Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. And it's funny because initially Martin Lawrence was the person who was signed on to do this project, but they were having trouble finding someone to play Mike Lowry. It's funny, at one point, Arsenio Hall was attached to play Mike Lowry. He declined, and then he later said that was one of the biggest mistakes he had ever made. I cannot imagine this film with Arsenio Hall. It's funny when you look at lists of people who auditioned for roles or were offered roles and then didn't take them or weren't able to take them. And I think in some cases it's like, oh, that would have been great. And the other times it's like, this worked out the way it was supposed to. So yeah, it was meant to be. And Will Smith coming on board is actually because of Martin Lawrence's sister, who mentioned him to Martin Lawrence, and then Martin Lawrence met with him, and then he was just like, okay, this is the guy, we gotta have them. I don't know if people realize that Martin Lawrence and his sister are the ones who are really responsible for Will Smith being on board with this, but yeah. I think the first film is a solid, you know, cop action film. I think what has always elevated these films is the comedic chemistry and talents of Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. Like, you feel like they are friends in real life, which they are. but just even as actors, like they feel real. They're hilarious. They're funny. Or when they go through things and they're emotional, like you feel that there is a genuine bond there. So whether it's good times or it's bad times, they ride together, they die together. Bad boys for life, of course. That has always rung true with the way that they depict their characters and their friendship. Okay, so I'm going to start with the pros for this, because there were a lot of pros, actually. I was pleasantly surprised by this film. First and foremost, the directors, Adil and Bilal, I think they did a great job taking over for Michael Bay. I think Michael Bay's in his own lane. I don't hate Michael Bay. I don't despise. I think he did a good enough job with the first two films. I think looking at Bad Boys 2, I've never disliked Bad Boys 2. I think it's one of those things that the critics hated and maybe some people hated. You know, critics versus the audience, that's always going to be a completely different thing. But I've always enjoyed that film. But I will say, kind of looking at it, there's just a lot going on in that film. It is 2 hours and 30 minutes of non-stop action, which is fun. Look, one thing I will say, especially as I get older, I am not mad at just a little fun escapism. I love watching stuff explode. But it just seemed like so much of the film was about that we didn't get a lot of the subtext and story as far as Marcus or as far as Mike. You know, it was a lot of it was just explosions. We got a little bit of stuff with Gabrielle Union and Sydney. A lot of the film was just there to show things explode. And let's just be real about that. I mean, there was so much that happened in that film. I mean, we had a shootout with the KKK. We had this massive gunfight and this car chase through the freeway with cars flying, crashing everywhere. We had this morgue van being chased with bodies and corpses flying everywhere. We had mansions exploding. We had more shootouts. We had a massive yellow Hummer crashing through this hill of shanties in Cuba. We had a face-off on a minefield in Guantanamo Bay. Like, there was a lot going on. And a lot of it was fun. But I think with Michael Bay, there's always this bombastic, overblown vibe to his films. I think his style is not for everyone. I think some people enjoy it. Some people are just like, oh my gosh, I have a headache from this. So yeah, so I think him stepping down was a good thing, because I think the direction of this was a lot cleaner. It was less messy. And I think what was great about it is that we got a lot of story and depth to Mike and Marcus that we hadn't really gotten in the first two films. It felt very refreshing. There was a lot of fluid energy that was happening throughout the film. And so I just felt like I was kind of flowing from one thing to the next. I didn't feel like I was just being thrown into one scene and one action set piece from one to the other. I felt like there was a real fluidity and a flow to what was going on, and I enjoyed that. I loved the conflict between Marcus and Mike, because from the beginning, it's always been the fact that Mike and Marcus have these dangerous positions as Miami PD detectives, but their lives are very, very different. Marcus has a wife, he has kids, he has a family, and every day he has to be mindful of that, because if he doesn't come home, they have to go on without him. With Mike, it's the fact that he's single and ready to mingle, and he can just kind of go out and he's living his life. And even though they are so different in their personalities, like there are a lot of things that make them different, but their bond is what always keeps them so tight knit. And it also in a way helps them really push to be so great at their jobs, because they're working alongside each other and they really care and love each other, so they have each other's back. So getting down to the third film, they've gotten a lot older. Marcus is officially a grandfather. His daughter is giving him his first grandchild, and then his daughter has gotten married, and he's ready to retire. Like he's given so much to this job over all these years, and he's just kind of tired. He's like, look, I'm ready to be grandpa. I'm ready to kick back and relax, enjoy my retirement, you know? And Mike at this point still doesn't have family. He doesn't have, you know, a wife, a girlfriend. He doesn't have much outside of his job. And I think that gives him an extra as far as, well, this is the one thing that matters in my life, so I'm going to put my all into that. And the fact that things come to a head and that they kind of realize, look, I can't really do this anymore. And I will say, I was genuinely shocked by the shootout scene with Mike. I was really not expecting that. And granted, in the end, you know that he's going to be okay. But it just, for him to almost get taken out like that and so early on in the film, that really shook things up. You know, there's always action, there are always these shootouts, but you always kind of feel like, okay, they're both great at their job, we're gonna get through it. So for Mike to get shot up like he did and then end up in a coma. I was like, wait, this just got real. This is different. They already set the tone for what this was going to be. And so then later on, when Mike eventually recovers and he wants revenge, Marcus at this point, who is now retired, is just like, you know what? I have always done this with you. I have been with you for years. Like, we have committed to this. We have done it. But I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. And then I think there's a point where Mike is just like, he still is pushing for it. He's thinking Marcus is going to be like, come on, come on, let's do this. And Marcus is just like, no, goodbye. I was like, whoa, that's what I'm saying. Like the conflict between them, I got, because it's just like, listen, at some point you get old. And I'm like, we can't keep doing the same things we did when we were young. And there was an undercurrent of that in the film. And I appreciated that they touched on that. Now, as far as ammo, otherwise known as Advanced Miami Metro Operations, I was real iffy about this when I saw it. We have Vanessa Hudgens as Kelly, Alexander Ludwig as Dorn, Charles Melton as Rafe. Weapons expert, tech expert, soldier. We have this young team on board. And I'm not gonna lie, in the trailer, and even in the movie when I saw them, I was just like, I don't know how I feel about this. Because I recall in Blade Trinity, they brought on Jessica Biel and Ryan Reynolds, and it was just like, why? and you know what? And that's another one. The third Blade was not good. Just like you're taking the focus away from a very important black superhero to add in these two white characters who aren't really needed. And it was another threequel that was not good for many reasons, their inclusion being a part of that. So when I saw them, I was like, oh no, it's Blade Trinity all over again. I can't do this. But actually, I will give the writers and the actors, I will give them credit for the way they did this, because Ammo was on point. Ammo was good. They even made a joke about the fact that they were straight out of High School Musical, and I was like, oh no. But no, they actually came through. By the end of the film, I was like, okay, yeah, I can see them again. They really actually brought a lot to the film. They came in clutch. And I know Mike was prepared to just do things by himself. And I even understood and appreciated a similar conflict with Mike and Ammo. Because it's like, look, I know I'm older, but I can do this by myself. And the team being like, well, you know what? We're not going to do things that way. And then wanting to do things by himself, but having to collaborate with a team and somebody other than Marcus. So there are a lot of dynamics going on with the story that I appreciated. So Marcus's conflict with Mike, and then Mike's conflict with Ammo, having to deal with his own age and his own struggle to continue to commit to his job, even though he's getting to a point where he really shouldn't be doing this anymore, because that's really all that he has, right? So yeah, Ammo was really great. I will give them kudos for that, because I didn't think it was gonna be good at all, and I actually really ended up enjoying Ammo a lot. We didn't have body parts and corpses falling out of morgue vans this time, but I think it was still so entertaining and so high energy. The car chase sequences were great. We had, bloody shootouts, stabbings, knockdown, drag out fights. It was plenty of action to be had, but it didn't feel like it was trying to overstuff itself with action. It was spaced out enough to where when it happened, it was like, oh, oh, oh. But then when it wasn't, there was still a good flow in between those moments. And I think also there was a good balance between the comedy and more of the emotional, serious moments. Like, it didn't feel like it was trying to be just silly all the time, but it also didn't feel like it was trying to take itself too seriously either. So I liked that. Like the car chase through Miami, even though I could tell it was Atlanta. I could tell they superimposed the two. The car chases and the motorcycles, like all of that was just fun. Like, I was into it. I loved all of that. And also what ended up happening to the captain, I was heartbroken. The captain has always been a part of this, him and his anger management issues. He's always been a recurring character in this. So I don't even want to say it. I don't even want to say it, but oh my gosh, when he got killed, I felt the weight of that. And the funeral and like all of that, I just was like, man. I was genuinely upset. But I'm glad that they did that, because then that was kind of the catalyst for Marcus to be like, okay, look, I don't really feel like being a part of this anymore. But for the captain, oh, we whooping some tail. Like, we're not letting that lie. So I appreciated how, as dark and sad as things would get, it also was motivation for the characters to like, okay, we gotta figure it out. Like, who are we taking down? Who are we writing out for? Because We ain't taking this lying down. Another thing I loved is how many people they brought back for the third installment. Joe Pantoliano as the captain, of course. Teresa Randall as Marcus's wife. They actually brought back the actress who played Marcus's daughter in Bad Boys 2. Her name was Bianca Bethune. It was cool to see they brought her back, and oh boy, I must say I was totally not ready during the delivery room scene for the camera to cut to the father of Megan's child, and it was Reggie from Bad Boys 2. As soon as I saw that man's face, I was like, oh my gosh, they did not bring him back. I mean, the audience was going wild, which is ironic because Reggie, of course, was featured in a very memorable scene from Bad Boys 2 where Marcus and Mike are both grilling him because he's taking Megan out on a date. And all those years ago, I still remember like the crowd was going wild during that entire scene. And his face, of course, was so memorable because he literally just had this one expression on his face the entire time. And so the fact that they brought him back and, you know, he's the father of her child and he's her husband, I was just like, man, that's crazy. So I love that they did that. And shout out to a couple of cameos. Michael Bay actually has a cameo appearance as the MC at Megan's wedding. Also making an appearance is Martin Lawrence's daughter, Jasmine. She plays one of the women at the club entrance when Mike and Marcus are trying to get in, and she's basically giving Marcus a hard time. So I thought the cameos were cool, and I think the continuity of bringing back people that we've seen before in these films. I always love when filmmakers and casting directors do that because it's always fun, and it feels like we've grown with these characters over the years. So I just had a couple of cons, not even real cons, just kind of moments that had me like, okay. It's just some of the story elements were a little oddly placed, kind of. It just, the juxtaposition of it was weird. So the villainess, Isabel La Bruja, I thought she was an intriguing character, and I thought the actress that played her did a good job. But it just was so weird to have a character that was a witch, you know, like into Santeria and all of that. It just was like oh, this is an odd choice, you know. So it was, for a long time, I was just kind of like, is she really a witch? It just felt the juxtaposition of this witch suddenly being a part of the picture. I was like, whoa, like this is new. But I will say, once they started kind of realizing that she was a witch and they kept referencing the fact that she was a witch, it was funny, especially when Marcus kept bringing it up, like, you slept with a witch? Like, it was hilarious. And to that point, I thought the plot twist with Mike's son was interesting. Like, I'm not really sure what to say about that. I mean, it makes sense because they were making a point to say that Mike doesn't have any family, and ha ha ha, he actually has family out there. But for a moment, it felt a little soap opera-ish, and it threw me off because I think they could have gotten someone who looked Afro-Latino. Like, it was a little odd that he looked, people were saying he looked like him. I was like, not really, but, and I don't know if they did that because they wanted to make it really like, you know, that's my son. But I'm like, could he have looked just a little bit more like you? Just, you know, a little curl in the hair and just a little darker skin, a little something to, you know, can we see the swirl? I know how DNA and genetics work. So, I mean, I understand you're not always going to look one way or the other. But in this case, I'm like, he could have looked a little more Afro-Latino, in my opinion. But in the overall story, I got it. So I wasn't really mad at it at the end. The only thing that was odd about it is just that after you find out that his son is the one who went and literally murdered all those people, there's this post-credit scene where Mike is basically recruiting him to do something, and his son is basically hoping for some sense of redemption for what he's done. I get that. But I hope we're not just going to smooth over the fact that this man killed a whole bunch of people and tried to kill you and tried to kill your partner. Like, I understand the family aspect, but I'm like, let's not flip this. Like, this man ain't been slicing and dicing and shooting, blasting away people this entire movie. So that was a little odd, but obviously they had to set up the sequel, so I'll take it. But even with the elements that felt a little odd, I think because Bad Boys for Life is so self-aware and it's kind of poking fun at itself, even those things felt fun. It just felt like, okay, we're just having a good time, which I did. I had a great time watching this, and I'm so glad I was proven wrong because I had my doubts about this. This con isn't related to the film specifically, but let me just say this. For all the people who are knocking Martin Lawrence over his weight and the fact that he's overweight and, you know, he looks like Big Mom and all sort of stuff, let me just say this. Martin Lawrence is an iconic comedian and comic actor. I will never forget watching Martin as a little boy in the Midwest and just loving it. I would even run back and say and repeat the lines to my mom, and she would just laugh. Like, I loved that show growing up, and I think he's only gone on to do even greater things. He's been in Do the Right Thing, House Party 2, Boomerang, Bad Boys, Thin Line Between Love and Hate, Nothing to Lose, Life, Blue Streak, Big Mama's House, What's the Worst That Could Happen, Black Knight, National Security, his comedy specials. He has done so much, and more importantly, that man has had battles with his mental health. He has struggled with drugs. You know, he has had a lot of issues over the years, and the fact that he is still healthy, he's still with us, he's still alive and around and in a good space, in a positive, healthy space to do this film and to do interviews with Will Smith, and just for people to continue to acknowledge his talents and how much people appreciate him. Like, I'm glad he's here. And so for me, that's all that's important. I don't care what he looks like. He doesn't have to look like Will Smith. He doesn't have to look the way that he did in Bad Boys or Bad Boys 2. It's just like, what are we talking about here? That's not about the movie, but I had to say that. But I think this is really the rare example of the third installment of a film that really has elevated the franchise and is arguably better than the first two. Dare I say that? Yeah, I'll say that. And knowing that so many Threequels really strike out, really kind of wreck the franchise, so to speak, I think this is a good example of a film where the third outing is definitely the charm. Like, they did a really good job with this, and so I'm glad I had a chance to see it. So I'm gonna go ahead and give Bad Boys for Life a B+. Very entertaining, very enjoyable, solid chemistry by Martin Lawrence and Will Smith as always, and just a very well-made action film. Nice switch up as far as direction and the vibe of this film, definitely worth going to see. So, once again, this is D, Movie Man, signing off, and I'll see you at the movies.